The great academy dining hall was filled with voices. Hundreds of alien cadets sat together at long tables, eating, laughing, and sharing stories of their home worlds. The air smelled of strange spices and glowing fruits, but one corner of the room was louder than the rest. That was where a group of alien girls were gathered, their silver eyes shining as they whispered and giggled among themselves. At the center of the group sat Lyra, a tall alien girl with skin that shimmered faintly under the lights, like moonlight reflecting on water. She had a sharp wit and a playful tongue, and everyone loved her jokes. That day, her voice carried louder than the others, drawing attention to her words. "If a human ever guessed my real name," she said with a smirk, "I would marry him." The group burst into laughter. Some nearly dropped their cups. The idea was ridiculous. Humans were the newest species in the academy, strange deathworlders who barely understood alien customs. They had short lifespans, weak frames compared to others, and no connection to the deep traditions of the stars. How could one of them ever hope to guess something as sacred as a real name? For Lyra's people, a real name was not what they used daily. It was hidden, tied to family honor and identity. Only those closest to them knew it. It was a secret passed from parents, whispered in rituals, spoken only in moments of deep trust. No outsider had ever guessed one correctly. That was why her joke was so funny. To the alien girls around her, it was like saying she would marry the moon itself. But someone heard her joke who wasn't supposed to. In a nearby table, a young human cadet froze with his fork and mitter. He had been quietly eating, trying not to draw attention, because humans often sat apart in the academy. The others called Earth a death world and mocked humans for being too reckless, too fragile, or too wild. But now his ears caught the words clearly. "If a human guessed my real name, I would marry him." The laughter stung his pride. They laughed because they thought it was impossible. They laughed because to them, humans were too simple to understand something so sacred. The cadet, however, didn't laugh. He felt a strange spark inside him, half challenge, half curiosity. He set down his fork slowly and glanced toward the group. Lyra noticed. Her silver eyes locked onto his brown ones. For a heartbeat, she felt uneasy. His gaze wasn't mocking. It wasn't amused. It was thoughtful, almost determined. She quickly turned away and pretended not to care, but inside, a small flicker of worry formed. Had he truly heard her? The laughter continued, echoing across the hall. One of the alien girls added, "Even if a human tried, they would never understand. They cannot even pronounce our words correctly." More giggles. More mocking smiles, but the human cadet's mind was already working. He remembered the lessons he had sat through about alien traditions. He recalled how much importance was given to family and the meaning hidden in sounds. He thought of the strange symbols he had seen on banners, the songs he overheard in the halls, and the way Lyra's eyes softened when she spoke of her home world. A thought formed. Maybe it's not impossible. That night, when others were asleep, the human sat in his small quarters, scribbling notes on a pad. He replayed her laugh in his head, her smirk, her proud tone when she joked. He wondered what her real name could mean. He thought about his own world, Earth, where names carried stories too of rivers, stars, warriors, and memories. If humans had hidden meanings, why couldn't he learn hers? Meanwhile, Lyra lay awake in her bed across the academy. She laughed to herself at first, remembering the human's stare. "As if he could ever guess," she whispered. But then her laughter faded. What if he tried? No, it was impossible. Humans couldn't understand the weight of such things. Still, something about his eyes unsettled her. They weren't the eyes of someone who ignored a joke. They were the eyes of someone who accepted a challenge. Days passed. The memory of the joke didn't fade. Whenever Lyra entered the hall, she noticed the human sitting quietly, studying, sometimes glancing her way. He never said a word, but his silence was heavy. The other aliens didn't notice, but she did. And slowly, her smirk began to fade when she thought of her own words. What if he really tried? What if he came close? She reminded herself it was just a joke. Nothing more. No human had ever guessed such a thing before, and none ever would. Yet deep inside, she couldn't shake the thought of his eyes, and the strange feeling they gave her. The joke had been harmless, something to make her friends laugh. But sometimes, even a small joke could start something much bigger than anyone expected. In that moment, the seeds of a story had been planted, one that would test tradition, pride, and even the walls between species. And Lyra, though she didn't know it yet, had just spoken the words that would change her life forever. The next morning, the academy felt alive with its usual rhythm, footsteps echoing in the grand halls, alien voices humming with strange accents, banners glowing faintly on the walls. But for one human cadet, the day was already different. He could not forget the alien girl's joke. He kept replaying her words in his mind. If a human guessed my real name, I would marry him. To the others, it was nothing more than a silly line, an impossible dare. But to him, it had become something else. It was like a puzzle carved in stone, daring him to solve it. As he walked across the courtyard, he noticed groups of aliens sitting in circles, chatting and laughing. They always laughed in ways that made humans feel outside, as if the joke was hidden in languages no human could ever understand. He was used to being the outsider. He had felt it since the first day he arrived at the academy, eyes following him, whispers behind his back, smiles that were not kind. But this time, something inside him was stronger than their laughter. He wanted to know her real name, because of the promise of marriage, though that shocked him, too, but because of what it meant. In his heart, he wanted to prove that humans were not blind, not simple, not lesser. He wanted to show that they could understand things others thought were impossible. That evening, instead of resting, he sat in the academy's library. The place was quiet, filled with old scrolls, glowing tablets, and holographic archives. Most cadets hated studying here. It was dusty, strange, and smelled of old metals. But the human didn't care. He searched for fragments of her people's culture. He read about their history. He studied their sacred songs. He looked at the shapes of their family crests, the patterns woven into their clothes, the way their words carried hidden meanings. Names, he discovered, were never random in her culture. Each carried weight, sometimes tied to rivers, sometimes to stars, sometimes to battles fought long ago. A real name was not just sound, it was story, it was legacy. He whispered to himself, if I can learn their stories, I can find hers. But curiosity alone was not enough. He needed clues. And for that, he needed to get closer to her. The next day, he saw her in the training hall. Lyra stood tall among her friends, her skin glowing faintly under the white lights as she practiced with a spear-like weapon. Her movements were sharp, perfect, and graceful, like someone born to lead. The human watched for a while, then stepped forward. Good form, he said quietly. Her friends turned first, their faces twisted with mockery. A human dares to comment? One of them sneered. Lyra raised an eyebrow but didn't answer. Instead, she gave him a long, unreadable look, then turned back to her training. Most humans would have walked away under that silence, but he didn't. He stayed until she finished her practice. When her friends left, she finally spoke. "You are still staring at me," she said, her tone half amused, half curious. "Why?" The human met her silver eyes without flinching. "Because I want to understand," she tilted her head. "Understand what?" He hesitated for a second, then said, "You." For the first time she blinked in surprise. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, direct, simple, honest. Usually, others flattered her or feared her sharp tongue. But this human, his words were plain, almost naive. Yet they carried a strange strength. "You think you can?" she asked, her lips curving into a faint smirk. Not yet, he admitted. But I'll try. Her laugh was soft this time, not mocking, but curious. She shook her head and walked away, but something in her chest tightened. He wasn't like the others. He didn't try to impress her, and he didn't cower either. He simply spoke, as if his words were a promise to himself. That night, she thought about him again. His determination was unusual. Why would a human care so much about understanding her people, her name, her world? Was it pride? Curiosity? Or something else she couldn't name? Meanwhile, the human stayed awake in his quarters, notes scattered across the table. He wrote down every word he had heard her say, every glance, every detail of her reactions. He mapped connections between her gestures and the cultural fragments he had studied. It was slow, difficult work. He knew it could take weeks, maybe months. But he didn't mind. For him, it was more than just solving a riddle. It was about showing that humans had the will to learn, the heart to listen, and the courage to try. Others thought of curiosity as weakness. He saw it as strength. And though Lyra didn't admit it yet, she was beginning to sense it too. In the days that followed, whenever she saw him, she felt a quiet pressure inside her chest. The human wasn't laughing at her joke. He wasn't mocking or forgetting it. He was chasing it like a star he refused to let fade. And for the first time, Lyra began to wonder, what if, against all odds, he actually came close? Lyra had laughed when she first made the joke. To her, it was nothing but a game, a way to make her friends laugh. A human, guessing her real name. Impossible. But now, days later, she could not laugh so easily. Everywhere she went, she felt it, the human's quiet gaze, steady and unshaken. He never mocked, never teased, never bragged. He simply watched. And worse, she knew he was learning. At night, when the training halls grew silent, Lyra lay awake in her dormitory. The ceiling above glowed faintly with soft lights, meant to remind the cadets of stars. But for her, the stars brought no peace. They reminded her of home, of her family, and of the sacred promise tied to her name. Her people's culture was older than most in the academy. Names were not simple labels. They were living pieces of history. A real name carried one's ancestors, victories, rivers crossed, and battles endured. To reveal it was to reveal one's soul. If a stranger spoke it, they were bound. The old laws said it tied two spirits together. She had never thought about those laws seriously until she made that joke. Now the weight of it pressed on her chest like iron. What if he succeeds? The thought scared her more than she wanted to admit. She imagined standing in front of her people while a human spoke her real name. She imagined their shock, their whispers, their judgment. To them, it would mean she had chosen him, whether by joke or not. And she wasn't ready for that. But there was another fear, one she couldn't even tell her closest friends. What if she didn't mind? When she remembered the human's eyes, she felt a strange warmth inside, mixed with fear. His gaze wasn't arrogant like the others who tried to impress her. It wasn't shallow. It was searching, patient, steady. It made her wonder if he truly saw her, not just the shimmering skin, not just the proud heritage, but her as a person. Her friends didn't notice her unease. They laughed about him often. "The human looks at you like a child staring at a locked door," one of them teased. "Maybe he thinks you are some puzzle to solve." She forced a laugh in return, but her smile faded when no one watched. Inside, her heart raced. He wasn't just looking at a puzzle, he was trying to unlock it. And she had given him the key with her careless words. The next day, in the language chamber, she overheard whispers. The human was asking questions again about her people, about their songs, about old poems carved into stone. He wasn't even subtle anymore. Others teased him, called him foolish, but he kept asking. Her fear grew sharper. He was getting closer. Too close. She found herself avoiding him in the corridors. When he entered the dining hall, she turned away. When he trained nearby, she focused harder on her drills, pretending not to notice him. But her silence did nothing to slow him. If anything, it seemed to push him harder. One evening, unable to contain her unease, she slipped away to the academy garden. It was a quiet place, filled with alien trees that glowed faintly blue. She sat under one, her arms wrapped around her knees, trying to steady her thoughts. Why can't I stop thinking about him? She whispered to herself. She thought of her family's honor, of the weight of tradition. If a human spoke her real name, her people would see it as betrayal. Yet when she pictured his determined eyes, another part of her whispered something different, something she wasn't ready to admit. Footsteps crunched on the path. Her heart jumped. It was him. The human stopped a few steps away, respectful, as if he sensed she wanted space. For a long moment, neither spoke. The night air hummed with the soft glow of the garden. Finally, he said quietly, "Am I frightening you?" Her head snapped up. His voice wasn't mocking. It was gentle, almost careful. She shook her head quickly. "No, humans don't frighten me." But inside, she knew it wasn't true. He did frighten her, not because he was dangerous, but because he was getting too close to the truth. Because he was breaking the wall she had built. He gave her a small nod, as if he already knew her answer was only half true. Then he stepped back. "I'll stop if you want me to," he said, "but I don't think you really want me to." Her breath caught. His words sank into her like a stone into water, sending ripples across her heart. When he left, she sat under the glowing tree, trembling. She wanted to deny it, to tell herself it was all just a joke. But deep down, she knew something dangerous was unfolding. Her hidden fear wasn't just that he might discover her name. Her real fear was what might happen to her heart if he did. The academy halls grew colder as weeks passed. Yet the fire of curiosity inside the human cadet burned hotter each day. His quiet determination did not fade. If anything, it grew sharper. Lyra felt it every time he entered a room. He never announced himself, never boasted, never spoke of her joke. But his silence was heavy, like the weight of a storm hiding behind still air. What unsettled her most were the whispers, those soft words that slipped through when he thought no one was listening. One evening, she passed by the practice yard. The place was empty except for him. He stood with a datapad, muttering softly to himself. She froze, her heart racing when she heard fragments of her people's language on his lips. He was practicing the sounds. Clumsy, rough, broken, but the attempt was real. He stumbled on syllables, but each failure made him try again. Her breath caught. No human should have cared that much. No one outside her people should even dare. Yet there he was, whispering pieces of their sacred tongue to the night air. She almost stepped forward to stop him, to tell him that he was playing with fire. But something in his voice, low, steady, stubborn, rooted her to the ground. She listened in silence until he finally sighed and left. That night, she couldn't sleep. The sound of her language, carried in his rough human voice, echoed in her mind. It should have angered her. Instead, it left her trembling with something she could not name. The next day, whispers spread among the cadets. The human spends hours in the archives. He's obsessed with something. I heard he's chasing after her name. Lyra's friends laughed again. They called him foolish, desperate, hopeless. One even joked, maybe we should give him a fake name, just to watch him embarrass himself. But Lyra stayed quiet. She couldn't join their laughter anymore. She alone knew how close he was. He wasn't chasing blindly, he was learning, and worse, he was beginning to see the clues she hadn't meant to leave behind. She noticed it during their training drills. When an instructor shouted commands, his eyes flickered toward her crest insignia, tracing the carved lines of her family emblem. He studied the patterns on her uniform, the way the symbols curved like rivers meeting stars. He wasn't just looking, he was reading. Later, In the dining hall, she caught him listening intently to a group of her people singing a traditional song. His head tilted, his lips moved faintly, repeating certain words under his breath as if carving them into memory. And when their eyes met, he didn't look away. Something in her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him to stop, to walk away from this path before it was too late. But every time she opened her mouth, the words froze. Because deep down, she wasn't sure she wanted him to stop. One evening, fate cornered her. She was in the gardens again, standing under the glowing trees when she heard footsteps. This time, she didn't need to look. She knew it was him. "Why do you keep chasing this?" she asked before he could speak. Her voice was sharp, a shield for her trembling heart. "It was only a joke." "Nothing more." He paused, then stepped closer. His expression was calm, steady, like stone shaped by rain. "Because it matters to you," he said softly. "And if it matters to you, then it matters to me." Her chest tightened. She shook her head, forcing a bitter laugh. "You don't even know what you're asking for. My name is not just a sound. It's blood, history, a chain of promises. If you speak it, you cannot turn away. You would be bound." His eyes didn't flinch. "Then let me be bound." Her heart stumbled at his words. He spoke them without hesitation, as if binding himself already. No one had ever dared to say such a thing to her, not even those of her own kind. "You are a fool," she whispered. "Maybe," he replied. "But I'd rather be a fool who tried than a coward who never did." That night, she walked back to her dormitory in silence, but her thoughts were in chaos. He was too close now. The clues were no longer scattered fragments. He was weaving them together, shaping the outline of her true name. She had wanted to laugh at him, to mock him, to prove that no human could ever pierce the sacred veil of her people's secrets. But instead, she felt afraid, not afraid of shame or tradition, or her people's judgment. She was afraid of what her heart would do when the moment came, when he stood before her, looked into her eyes, and spoke the word that bound them forever. The academy was a place of rules, drills, and endless rivalry. But for the human and the alien girl, something else had begun to grow, something neither of them planned. It started small. During training one morning, Lyra stumbled slightly while sparring. It was nothing serious, just a slip on the polished floor. But the human stepped forward without hesitation, offering his hand. She stared at it for a long second. Most of her kind would never accept help in front of others. To them, showing weakness was shameful. But something in his steady eyes made her fingers move before she could think. She placed her shimmering hand in his rough one, and he pulled her to her feet. The moment was brief, almost invisible to the rest. But to her it lingered long after. Later in the dining hall, they ended up seated across from each other. At first, the table felt like a battlefield of silence. Lyra picked at her glowing fruit, pretending not to notice him. The human ate quietly, avoiding her gaze. But then, he asked softly, "Do you miss home?" She blinked. No one ever asked her that. They assumed she was too proud, too strong, too perfect to miss anything. She hesitated, then admitted, "Sometimes." The rivers. The way the sky glows at night. The human nodded. "Earth has rivers too. Not glowing, but full of life. I miss the sound of them." Her lips curved slightly. For the first time, she realized they shared something, the ache of distance, the weight of longing. Different worlds, but the same feeling. That night, she caught herself smiling at the memory of his words. Days passed, and their conversations grew longer. At first, they exchanged only safe topics, training, food, the strange rules of the academy. But slowly, walls began to fall. She told him stories of her people's stars, how each constellation carried a name and a promise. He listened with quiet awe, not interrupting, not mocking, only absorbing every word. In return, he spoke of earth, the scent of rain on dirt, the sound of birds at dawn, the way humans sat around fires and shared songs. His voice softened when he described it, and she found herself picturing his world more vividly than she expected. One evening, under the glowing garden trees, she confessed something she had never told anyone. "I wasn't supposed to come here," she said. "My family wanted me to stay on my world, to follow tradition. I came to prove something. That I wasn't weak. That I could be more than what they expected." The human looked at her, his expression calm, steady. "You don't need to prove that," he said. "You already are more." Her chest tightened. She had heard praise before, but it always came coated with flattery or fear. His words were different, simple, honest, raw. They struck deeper than she wanted to admit, but their growing closeness did not go unnoticed. Other cadets whispered. Some mocked. "Look at the human," one sneered. "He thinks he can court one of them." Others shook their heads. "She entertains him too much. It will ruin her honor." The whispers stung her, but she pretended not to care. What confused her was that she truly didn't want to care. When she was with him, the rest of the academy faded. The jokes, the rules, the weight of tradition, all of it blurred. Only his voice remained, his quiet laughter, his stubborn determination to keep trying even when others doubted him. One night, rain fell across the academy domes. Cadets hurried inside, but Lyra found herself standing at the edge of the courtyard, watching droplets shimmer in the glow of alien lights. The human appeared beside her, his uniform damp, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked at her and smiled. "You know," he said, "on Earth, we run into the rain. We don't hide from it." She gave him a sharp look. "That's foolish." "Maybe," he replied, "but it's also freeing." Before she could answer, he stepped into the downpour, lifting his arms as if embracing the storm. His laugh echoed through the courtyard, raw and unrestrained. She stared, torn between shock and amusement. Then, to her own surprise, she stepped forward too. The cold rain hit her skin, soaking her hair, streaking her glowing complexion. For a moment, she forgot fear, forgot her name, forgot tradition. She only laughed with him, loud, wild, and free. It was the first time she had ever felt like that. Later, drenched and breathless, they sat under the shelter of the garden trees. Their laughter faded into silence, and for a long moment, only the sound of rain remained. Lyra turned to him, her voice softer than she meant. "Why do you keep doing this? Why keep trying, even when the whole academy mocks you?" He looked at her, his eyes steady as always. "Because you're worth it." Her heart faltered. For once, she had no sharp reply, no clever laugh. Just silence, and the dangerous warmth spreading in her chest. That night, lying in bed, she whispered to herself, "He is not supposed to matter." But he does. The bond she had feared was already forming. It wasn't in names or laws or jokes anymore. It was in laughter shared under rain, in stories of rivers and stars, in truth spoken quietly between two outsiders, and though she would not admit it aloud, she knew the truth. The human was no longer just chasing her real name. He was already finding her. Asterisk. The day arrived quietly, as if the academy itself was holding its breath. Training drills ended early, and cadets filled the great hall for a celebration of midterm victories. Long banners of many worlds hung from the high ceiling, glowing with soft light. Music echoed across the chamber, laughter spilling over food and drink. It should have been an ordinary night. But for Lyra, nothing felt ordinary. Her heart thudded in her chest when she noticed him, standing alone near the edge of the crowd. His human uniform sharp but plain, his eyes steady as ever. He wasn't laughing, wasn't joining the others. He was waiting. And deep inside, she already knew why. Her friends clustered around, whispering, joking, daring each other to approach the human. "He thinks he is clever," one of them sneered. Maybe tonight he will finally embarrass himself. Lyra tried to laugh with them, but her voice shook. Because she wasn't sure he would embarrass himself. She wasn't sure at all. As the music faded, the human stepped forward. The crowd hushed at the sight of him. Even the instructors paused, curious. It was rare for a human to draw attention in this hall, and rarer still, for one to walk with such quiet confidence. He stopped in front of Lyra. The air grew heavy. Every eye turned toward them. Lyra forced a smirk, though her hands trembled at her sides. "Have you come to make a fool of yourself, human?" she asked. He didn't smile. His voice was calm, firm. "No, I've come to keep a promise." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him to stop, to turn away, to leave this fire before it of them both. But the words stuck in her chest. The human drew a breath, and in the silence of the hall, he spoke. Not her common name. Not the title the Academy knew, but the true one, the name whispered by her mother at birth, carried by the rivers of her home world, bound to the stars of her ancestors. A name she had never spoken outside her family, and yet, he spoke it. The sound was not perfect, but it was alive. Each syllable shaped with care, each tone heavy with meaning. It wasn't mimicry, it was understanding. The hall went utterly silent. Her friends froze, their laughter dying on their lips. The instructors stared in disbelief. Even the glowing banners above seemed to dim. Lyra's breath caught. Her legs felt weak, her chest burning. He had done it. Against every law, every expectation. Every mocking voice, he had guessed her real name, and now, by her people's tradition. The joke she once made had become a bond she could not deny. Her face burned with heat. Shame, and something far more dangerous. Awe. "You," her voice broke. And she swallowed hard. "How did you?" The human met her eyes, his expression calm, but his voice steady with quiet fire. "Because I listened. To your songs. To your stories. To you." The word struck harder than the name itself. She felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her, as though every wall she had built had crumbled in an instant. Around them, whispers rose. It cannot be. A human? Speaking her name? This breaks every law. But none of it mattered. Not the crowd. Not the judgment. Not the rules. Only the truth mattered, that he had seen her, truly seen her, and uncovered what no one else dared. Her silver eyes trembled, and she realized something terrifying. She wasn't angry. She should have been furious, shamed, humiliated. Instead, her heart thundered with something else. Pride, wonder, and a strange warmth she had no name for. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," he said softly. "I do." The words were not defiant. They were simple, like his nature. And yet, they carried the weight of someone who had chosen this path long ago, and never once looked back. The head instructor finally broke the silence. His deep voice boomed through the chamber. "This cannot be ignored. The ancient law is clear." Gasps echoed through the hall. Everyone knew the meaning. If a real name was spoken by an outsider, the bond was sealed. Lyra's heart pounded. Her joke had been a shield, a game. But now the law demanded she honor it. She looked at the human, her lips trembling. He didn't smile. He didn't mock. He simply waited, calm, patient, certain. The sight of him standing there, drenched in the weight of her culture but unbroken by it, made her chest ache. She wanted to deny it, to scream, to run. But instead, a whisper escaped her lips. "You truly are a fool." Her voice faltered. Then, softer almost to herself, "But you are my fool." The hall erupted with gasps, shouts, disbelief. But in that moment, none of it mattered, because Lyra knew the truth. He had not just guessed her name, he had claimed her heart. And she, bound by law, by fate, by something far deeper, could no longer deny it. Asterisk. The hall was still ringing with whispers when the head instructor's voice cut through like steel. "The law has been spoken," he declared. "The bond cannot be undone. The alien girl made the promise. The human has fulfilled it. By tradition, she belongs to him." The words sent a shiver across the room. Some cadets gasped in outrage, others laughed in disbelief, but most simply stared, waiting to see what would happen next. Lyra's chest rose and fell quickly, her hands clenched at her sides. She had spoken her joke in laughter, never expecting it to return as a chain of iron. Now the weight of her people's tradition pressed heavily on her shoulders, but when she looked at the human standing tall in front of her, something inside her shifted. He wasn't proud. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't looking at her like a prize won. He was looking at her the same way he always had, steady, quiet, patient, not like she belonged to him, but like he belonged to her. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers louder. "This is a disgrace. A human cannot bind with one of them. She should reject him, deny the law." The pressure mounted, but the human did not move. He kept his gaze on Lyra, calm and unshaken, as though the whole galaxy could scream, and he would still hear only her voice. And for the first time, she understood something important. He hadn't done this for honor, or for power, or even for victory. He had done it for her, because he had listened, because he had cared, because he had wanted to understand. Her lips trembled, and she whispered to herself, "What have I done?" The head instructor stepped closer, his expression stern. "Do you accept this bond, cadet? Or will you dishonor your own words before the academy?" The hall fell silent, every eye turned to her. Her friends stared, waiting to laugh if she rejected him. The other cadets leaned forward, hungry for scandal. Even the glowing banners seemed to hold their light, waiting for her choice. Her heart thundered. She thought of her family, her home, the ancient traditions that chained her people. She thought of the risk, the shame, the fury that might await her if she accepted. And then she thought of the rain, of laughter shared in the storm, of stories whispered under glowing trees, of simple words that had broken her walls. "You are worth it." She lifted her head, her silver eyes locking onto the human's brown ones. And in that moment, she knew her answer. "I do not dishonor my words," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I remember them, and I stand by them." Gasps echoed through the hall. The head instructor's eyes widened, then narrowed in respect. So be it. The law was sealed. The crowd exploded, some shouting, some laughing, some furious. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. Because in that moment, the human and the alien girl stood together, and the noise of the hall faded into nothing. He gave her the smallest of smiles. "You didn't have to." Her lips curved, half smirk, half sincere. "You didn't have to either. But here we are." Later, under the quiet night sky of the academy, they walked side by side in the gardens where it had all begun. Lyra touched the bark of a glowing tree, her voice softer than the breeze. "Do you know what my real name means?" He shook his head. "No, only that it matters." Her eyes shimmered in the starlight. "It means bound to the river and the stars, a name of heritage, a name of destiny." He nodded. "Then destiny brought me here." She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "You really are a fool." "Maybe," he admitted. "But I'm your fool now." Her chest tightened at the words. For the first time, she let herself smile without fear. The promise she had spoken as a joke had become reality. And though it began in laughter, it ended in truth. The Academy would never forget the night a human spoke an alien's real name. It would be told in whispers, argued over in councils, remembered as scandal or miracle. But for Lyra, none of that mattered, because she knew the truth. The bond was not forged by a name alone. It had been built through patience, courage, laughter, and trust. Through rivers and stars, rain and silence. stories and hearts. And as she walked beside the human, the memory of her joke returned, yet now. It no longer made her laugh, it made her smile, because promises, no matter how small, carry weight. And this promise, once spoken in jest, had become the story that changed both their lives forever.